It's been easy enough to apply texture to a specific side of a model for a while now, with texture build plates giving you looks such as carbon fiber. But applying a texture to an entire model, or a specific part of one, can be unnecessarily challenging. Luckily, someone has built a tool which allows you to do just that, so today I'll take you through what it can do and how to use it. So, let's take a look. Adding a detailed texture geometry to the surface of your 3D prints can add a real wow factor to it, evidenced by the popularity of the knitted style designs on sites such as MakerWorld recently. Applying a texture which perfectly wraps around complex geometry is considered a bit of a dark art for many, but luckily a Turkish mechanical engineering student, Frieden Oktar, sorry if that's mispronounced, has produced a website which allows you to bake texture directly into the geometry of an STL ready for 3D printing. This tool is available on meshtexture.com, so let's pop over there and have a look at how it works. There's no software or anything to download, everything is done within the website, though the processing itself is done locally, something I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. When you land at meshtexture.com, the first thing you want to do is go to Load STL to select the model that you want to apply texture to. We're just going to use this cat for now, which has nice smooth surfaces, so should be a good example of showing how the texture changes its appearance. Once you've got your model imported, the next thing you want to do is select the texture that you want to apply to it. So you can either upload your own texture as an image, something we'll look at in a bit, or you can select one of the 6 preset textures: carbon fiber, knurling, hexagon, leather, cement, and wood. Once you've selected your model and your texture, you now need to say where on your model you want this texture to be. So this selection area here is effectively a set of paint tools. The Smart Fill option and the Angle Threshold are effectively the same as the Smart Fill tool in modern slicers such as Bamboo Studio. So if we were to set our Angle Threshold here and then click somewhere on our model, it's going to fill that area with texture up to the point that the geometry reaches the angle I've selected. Below that we have paint area, and if we turn this on, this is going to give us a paintbrush. You can change the brush size and the angle tolerance of the brush. With this selected, if we hold E and click and draw on our model, it's going to paint the texture onto the model. If we hold R and draw, it will erase that painted area. We also have select entire STL file, and if we select that, it will paint the entire model with the texture. Finally, here in the painting section, we have clear, which will just clear all of the painted application that we put on, but we'll go with entire STL file for now. One thing I would say is if you're using a particularly fine texture and it is being printed directly on the print bed rather than the whole thing being supported by support material, you may want to untick paint area using the Smart Fill tool, hold R, and remove the texture from the area that's going to be sat on the print bed to ensure that it gets a nice flat surface on the bottom. However, this may require you to cut the model later to cut away any of the extrusions around the edges of this line. I'm going to leave this with the entire model painted for now though. Once you've painted your model, you then need to set how the texture is going to look. So under texture mapping, we have triplanar and spherical. This effectively chooses how the texture is going to be wrapped around the model. Mostly, you're probably going to be fine using triplanar, and it does seem to automatically select which of these two it thinks would be best to suit this model. Spherical is better if you're using a particularly curved surface like a sphere or a cylinder. If I select spherical now, you can have a quick look at how that works, and you can see that it is all rotating around this point here. This allows us to adjust pole smooth, which doesn't seem to be doing anything now, but that effectively adjusts how the texture will converge on this single point. We'll go with triplanar for now. We'll look at the back of the cat so we can see the texture. The scale will adjust the size of the texture, how big it is being projected onto the model. The amplitude is effectively how deep the texture is. A positive number, above 0, will cause the light parts of the texture to raise up or extrude away out from the current geometry wall of the model. A negative amplitude number, so below 0, will cause the dark areas of the texture to be cut into the existing walls of the model. We'll go with something like, say, 0.8 on this for now. For sharpness, this is basically the contrast of the texture. So this is how much of a gradient there will be between the highest point and the lowest point. The offset will allow you to adjust and move where the texture is on the model. And then we have rotation, which allows us to rotate it up and down. We'll come up to max triangles in a second, because I've skipped one, is the align to selection. This can be a good way of ensuring that the texture follows the contours of the model more specifically. So you can see that there's a sharp line here and here. If we click align to selection and then rotate the texture, it appears to flow more naturally with the design of our model. Now lastly here we have max triangles. Max triangles is effectively the amount of detail that it is going to add to the geometry using this texture. This model currently has almost 400,000 triangles, but it's obviously not a particularly complicated model. I generally find that 5 million triangles works fine, but it depends on the complexity of the model and the power of your computer, so experiment with this to find what works for you. Once you've got everything ready, you can click Apply Bake. This is now taking that texture and recreating the geometry of the model with that texture baked in. And here you can see that the texture has been baked into our model and it is now part of the geometry. As I mentioned, the processing is done locally on your system rather than on some powerful server somewhere. So if you do have an older or less powerful computer, it might take a while for this processing to happen depending on what settings and the complex of your model. If it does pop up with a little window asking if you want to wait or kill the page, don't worry, it's not crashed, it's just taking a while, so hit wait and give it a minute. If you do have a less powerful computer, you might find that your slicer struggles to import your textured model. If you do find it struggling, try reducing the triangle count and exporting again. Even more powerful computers can struggle with overly complex or under-optimized designs, so just start small and work your way up. Right, well, we've exported our first test textured model. Let's get this sliced up and get it printed. Well, this looks great. At first glance and from a distance, the texture kind of looks like a fur texture which works for the cat, but then under closer inspection, it becomes wood grain. Let's jump back in and look at a couple of other options and settings. Trying something a bit different, we'll load a skull. This time it's a bit more of a detailed model. You can see there's a lot more detail there and we're almost at 700,000 triangles before I even start. For this one, we're going to upload our own texture. We've got wood here and we've got bricks. We've already gone for a wood, so let's go for bricks on this guy. And again, we're just going to apply it to the whole model. Now it looks like there's not really a texture there, but if we just adjust the scale, we can see the bricks here. So I want them to be quite big. Let's go like that. That looks pretty good. And you can see that with the triplanar selection we've got here, it goes around the skull up to a certain point, and when we get to the dome, it goes across the top. If we switch to spherical, you can see that it is all coming into a single point. The triplanar is probably what I would go for this model. And then we've got our amplitude. Let's take that up to 0.5 and we'll go with that. And I'm happy with all that. So let's hit apply bake. Let's get that printed and see how it comes out. This skull is intended to be printed entirely on support, so I don't need to worry about bed adhesion with the full model texture here. It printed really well and the texture came out really nicely. It's quite subtle, but I did use quite a light amplitude setting. But I think this looks great. Let's do one final test print. This time I want to see how well this works with multicolored prints, both with the painting process and with the actual printing process. I downloaded this Pikachu model, which whilst assembled is separated into separate parts. I then selected it all and exported it as a single STL. I then imported that into mesh texture, and for this one I think we'll go with carbon fiber. When it came to painting, even though I'd merged it into a single STL and it had gone through this texture application process, painting it still kept the original separate parts isolated. So providing I was only clicking on one part, say the eye, it wouldn't then paint the body even if the painting sphere overlapped it. With that painted, it's time to print it. I decided to make and print two versions of this with different amplitude settings to see how that setting would adjust the look. Well, these are by far my favourite of these test prints. They both look fantastic. With the one featuring the deeper amplitude, I was expecting there to be more issues with overhangs, but it seems to have come out really nicely. Both of these look great. None of these test prints were very creative, they were just basic examples slapping a random texture on a random model. But if used correctly, this could be a really useful tool, adding an extra dimension to your prints. This tool is still very much an early proof of concept, but even in that state, it has the potential to be genuinely useful. Faridun has listed several plans for future improvements, including adding a brush to apply different textures to different areas of a model, adding to the included texture library, and a simplification process that would reduce the polygon count whilst retaining detail, speeding up processing, importing, and slicing. So again, this tool is available to use at meshtexture.com, and for now at least it's available to use completely for free. The maker community is great at thinking of out-of-the-box ways of using different tools, so I would love to hear of different use cases that you've got in mind for this tool. If you have some interesting use cases or some ideas that you'd like to see implemented into it in the future, let me know in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful, and if you did, please do hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss out on my future videos on 3D printing and maker tech. If you'd like to support me and get yourself bonus goodies like early access to my videos and a discount at 3drevolutionstore.com where you can get stuff like this t-shirt, just hit join below any of my videos. For now, thanks very much everyone, and until next time, happy printing. Thanks for hanging around everyone, and of course a massive thank you to my revolutionaries, my channel members, for your support. It means so much and it keeps this channel going. I've got some exciting videos on the way very soon, but for now, why not chuck on one of my other videos to learn something new or have some fun. Thanks very much everyone, and until next time, happy printing.